You think you know what kind of person you are. You think if you were handed power over another human being, you'd use it fairly. Every single guard in this experiment thought that too. Every single one was wrong within 48 hours. So what does that actually say about you? In August 1971, a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo put an ad in a local newspaper. $15 a day, it said, for a study of prison life. Male college students only. No experience necessary. 70 people applied. Zimbardo and his team picked 24 of them. The 24 who scored the healthiest, most stable, most psychologically normal on a battery of tests. No history of violence, no criminal records, no red flags of any kind. This wasn't a study of bad people, that's the whole point. That's the part everyone forgets. Zimbardo wasn't trying to find monsters. He was trying to find the most boring, average, well-adjusted young men he could, and then watch what happened when you handed some of them power and stripped the rest of it away. He flipped a coin. Half became prisoners, half became guards, and then he built a fake prison in the basement of Stanford's psychology building, and he let the experiment run. Here's what you need to understand before anything else happens in this story. Nobody told the guards how to be guards. There was no training, no script, no instructions on what was allowed and what wasn't, beyond a vague suggestion to maintain order and not use physical violence. Zimbardo handed them wooden batons, mirrored sunglasses, and khaki uniforms, and then he stepped back and watched. He wanted to see what they could invent on their own, and what they invented almost immediately was cruelty. By day 2, guards were waking prisoners in the middle of the night for head counts. They forced them to do push-ups, sometimes with a guard's boot resting on a prisoner's back. They took away mattresses as punishment. They made prisoners clean toilets with their bare hands. They began referring to prisoners not by name, but by number, stitched onto their smocks, because a number is easier to dehumanize than a face. None of this was ordered. None of this was planned. It emerged on its own from 20-something-year-old college students who, 1 week earlier, had been worrying about midterms. So what happened? How do you go from answered a newspaper ad for beer money to inventing psychological torment in under 48 hours? The answer isn't one thing. It's two independent forces, stacking on top of each other, and either one alone might not have been enough. Together, they were catastrophic. The first force is situational power. For most of human history, we've told ourselves a comforting story. Good people do good things, bad people do bad things. And character is a fixed internal trait you carry with you into every room. Zimbardo's experiment, along with a mountain of psychology research both before and after it, suggests something much less comfortable. Behavior isn't just about who you are. It's about what role you've been assigned and how convincingly the environment sells you on that role. Put a uniform on someone. Give them a badge, a title, a mirror-shaded pair of sunglasses so nobody can see their eyes. Put them in a building specifically designed to look and feel like a prison. Surround them with other people already acting like guards. And something shifts, not because they're pretending, because the role starts to feel real and the self starts to bend around it. Situational power doesn't erase who you are. It just turns out who you are was never as fixed as you thought. The second force is anonymity, and this one's sneakier. Psychologists call it de-individuation. The loss of individual identity within a group or role, and the corresponding loss of the self-monitoring that usually keeps your behavior in check. Think about it this way. You behave differently when you know you're being watched and judged as you, specifically, than when you're one interchangeable piece of a group wearing the same uniform as everyone else. The mirrored sunglasses weren't just intimidating. They were a mask. They hid the guards' eyes from the prisoners, which meant the guards could watch cruelty happening and never have to make eye contact with the person experiencing it. No eye contact, no individual accountability, just a role, a costume, and a crowd of other people already committed to playing along. Strip away someone's individual identity, and you strip away a huge chunk of what normally stops them from doing something they'd never do alone. Two forces. One handed people power without training, the other stripped away the identity that usually restrains that power. Neither one required a single bad person to already exist. That's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. But here's the twist, and it's the part most retellings of this story leave out entirely. The Stanford Prison Experiment has a serious problem, and the problem isn't the guards, it's Zimbardo, because Zimbardo wasn't a neutral scientist quietly observing from behind a two-way mirror. He was the prison's superintendent. He inserted himself directly into the world he was supposedly just studying, and in later years, audio recordings and archival documents revealed something damning. Zimbardo actively coached at least one guard to be tougher, encouraged the harsh treatment as it escalated, and, by his own later admission, got so absorbed in his role as prison superintendent that he stopped thinking like a scientist entirely. When a colleague finally visited the basement and asked him, with genuine alarm, what the independent variable of his study even was, Zimbardo apparently had no clear answer. He'd lost the thread. He'd become part of the experiment he was supposed to be observing. There's more. Some of the breakdowns that made the study famous, including a prisoner who had to be released after what looked like a severe psychological crisis, were later described by that same participant as at least partly performed. A way to get out of a situation he desperately wanted to escape, in an environment where saying, "I want to leave," apparently wasn't taken as sufficient reason to let him. And some guards, interviewed decades later, admitted they were partly performing too, playing the role of a cruel guard because they believed, correctly it turns out, that it was what the researchers wanted to see. So is the Stanford Prison Experiment fake? Not exactly. But it's also not the clean, controlled demonstration of human nature it's often presented as. It's messier. It's a story about a psychologist so certain he already knew what he'd find that he may have helped make it true, which honestly might be the more disturbing lesson. Even when the science is compromised, the underlying phenomenon it stumbled into, ordinary people escalating cruelty under the right conditions, keeps showing up anyway, over and over, in situations Zimbardo had nothing to do with. Which brings us to Abu Ghraib. In 2004, photographs surfaced from the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. American soldiers guarding Iraqi detainees had been photographed forcing prisoners into humiliating positions, using dogs to terrify them, stacking naked bodies into human pyramids. The images shocked the world. And when psychologists looked closely at what had happened, the parallels to a fake basement prison in 1971 were almost too exact to be a coincidence. Untrained young guards, minimal oversight, a chaotic, dehumanizing environment, uniforms, and anonymity. Zimbardo himself later testified as an expert witness in the defense of one of the Abu Ghraib guards, arguing that the situation, not some rare defect in the soldier's character, had produced the behavior. Critics pushed back hard on that defense, and reasonably so. A compromised 1971 psychology study shouldn't function as a get-out-of-consequences card for real human suffering in 2004. But the uncomfortable pattern connecting the two events doesn't disappear just because the science was messy. It just means the real explanation is more complicated than one flawed experiment proves a universal law of human nature. So where does that leave us? Not with a tidy answer, with something closer to a warning label. The situations we build, the roles we hand people, the anonymity we grant them, the oversight we withhold, shape behavior in ways that have nothing to do with whether someone is fundamentally a good or bad person. That's not an excuse for cruelty. The guards who tortured prisoners, real ones, in a real prison, made real choices. And choices carry real weight regardless of the situation surrounding them. But it is a warning about how little it might take to get otherwise ordinary people to make those choices, and how confident all of us are that it could never be us. You think you know what kind of person you are. So did every guard in that basement in 1971. The uncomfortable truth isn't that some of them turned out to be secretly evil. It's that the conditions did most of the work, and the conditions can be built again, quietly anywhere, by anyone who understands how thin that line actually is. The real question was never whether Zimbardo's experiment was perfectly designed. It's whether you'd recognize the moment it was happening to you.